tens of millions of tests very quickly. We're leading the world now in testing by far, and we're going to keep it that way. Other countries are coming to us, and they're wanting to know about our tests, and can they buy the tests, and can they do whatever they have to do to get the tests, and we're going to make that very soon. We'll be in a position to make that possible because it's important for them to have it. And we're going to have an announcement on the World Health Organization sometime next week. As you know, we give them approximately $500 million a year, and we're going to be talking about that subject next week. We'll have a lot to say about it. We'll hold it. Every American should be proud of what our country has achieved in just a short period of time. The U.S. military has deployed thousands of personnel to build 23 temporary hospitals with more than 16,000 beds. And we have the potential to build many more if we needed them. We're all ready to go, but I don't think we're going to need them, which is great news. And we built those hospitals in 12 states and the District of Columbia using the Defense Production Act, and we used it like a hammer. A lot of the media said, oh, we weren't using it. We used it like a hammer to a point where all we had to do is say the words and everybody gave us max, and they've done a good job. They really have done a good job with few exceptions. And we've harnessed the full power of American industry to produce ventilators and other essential supplies. Right now, we're making thousands of ventilators, many of which we won't need, but we'll use them in our stockpile. And we'll build that up. We'll also help build up the stockpiles, which they should have had in the states. And so we're working with governors on that, and we'll also help other countries. There are countries that are calling us for help. They need ventilators, and they're in no position to build ventilators. We are. We have Ford and General Motors, and many, many companies are building.
I don't know if you can see, I'm frozen. Hold on. Ay. Trump went live early. I didn't even know that was going to happen.
With certain additions. It's a company in Ohio that makes it. It's a great company, great. I hear it's a great product, works very well. I asked that question. I said, how come we have to buy so many masks? Why can't we sterilize the masks that are being used? And the answer was you can. In this case, they say up to 20 times. So we can take a mask, certain types of masks, the N95s in particular, and we can sterilize them, make them very clean up to 20 times. That's a great thing. In addition, we passed the largest emergency economic relief package in American history to save the U.S. economy and protect the American worker. As you know, this past week, which was 4 active days on the stock market, Good Friday today is not included. The markets are closed. In 4 days, we had the biggest market increase, stock market increase that we've had in 50 years. That tells you that there's a pent-up demand. That tells you they want to get back. There's something good going to happen. I really believe that. There's something very good going to happen. We have to get back. So think of it in this horrible period, this horrible, dark period where this monster came and
why was it early?
Its horrible spell over the world. 184 countries as of this morning. 184 countries. We've done well, and I guess the market thinks we've done well because we had the biggest stock market increase without one day. We're talking 4 days instead of 5 that we've had in 50 years. 50 years. Think of that. More than 50 years, actually. In short, the American people have launched the greatest mobilization of our society since World War II, deploying every scientific, governmental, medical, and military resource to defeat the virus. So I want to just start then with, we're going to answer questions later. We'll have time. I think we have a lot of time today. A lot of people are off, as they should be, Good Friday. So I'll stick around. We'll answer questions later. I want to start with Deborah Birx, please, Dr. Birx, and you can go over some of the numbers we just looked at, and that'd be great. Thank you very much, Deborah.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for outlining how well we are doing in a series of metro areas. What also has been encouraging for those of you who are watching epidemic curves every day, and I'm sure you are, and watching them in log phase, because that's how epidemiologists like to look at their curves, you can see for the first time that in the United States we're starting to level on the logarithmic phase like Italy did about a week ago. And so this gives us great heart that not only in specific places, but we're starting to see that change. Obviously, a lot of that is driven by the improvement in New York City.
11:12 here.
Remember, for a long time, they were over 50% of our cases and 50% of our new cases.
So it's 3 hours ahead
that
of
has dramatically changed because of the impact of what the citizens of New York and New Jersey and across Connecticut and now Rhode Island are doing to really change the course of this pandemic and really change the trajectory of new cases. We're seeing that what many states and metro areas were experienced as twofold and fourfold increases that went to twofold, that now those are going to 8 days between the doubling rate. Watching this every day gives us hope across these metro areas from New York and New Jersey and all through Denver and of course
I'm in LA.
through New Orleans. We still see cases occurring in the Boston area and in Chicago, but their rate of increase seems to be stabilizing. And we really want to call out the work of the mayors of Baltimore and the district and Philadelphia, who have really brought all of their health experts together and working with their communities are starting to really change the curves in those areas.
Really changing?
What we're seeing is we're united
bit,
in social distancing. And that's been very encouraging to all of us. And it should be encouraging to the healthcare providers that are on the front line, many of which are serving our Americans with such dignity and respect and ensuring that everybody gets optimal care. And as the president noted, our mortality in the United States is significantly less than many of the other countries when you correct them for our population. And that is really solely the work of our frontline healthcare providers. And so working with, you can really, hopefully you get the theme today that we are incredibly proud of our public health leaders at the city level, at the state level, at the federal level, who are working together to really change the course of this pandemic, working with their citizens and their communities to make these changes. And the American public who have really taken all of this to heart and stayed home. I know last week we really asked a lot of people in the Washington and Baltimore area to consolidate, not go out frequently to grocery stores or pharmacies. You can really see that that's having a huge impact. So
I need to figure out my
encouraging signs that we see, but as
sound
encouraging
mixing.
as they are, we have not reached the peak. And so every day we need to continue to do what we did yesterday and the week before and the week before that, because that's what in the end is going to take us up across the peak and down the other side.
How many more days do you think we have?
To really applaud
I say like
the work
2
of
weeks, maybe?
California and Washington State and Oregon. We're learning from all three of those states, from their public health officials, about how they were able to keep the virus from ever becoming logarithmic. And I think that's an important lesson for all of us on how they did that, what the timing was in case we ever have to face this issue in the future. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, we're doing pretty good over here in California.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Fauci.
So again, just keeping on the theme that Dr. Birx had mentioned, this is the end of the week, that famous week that we spoke about last weekend, in which what actually was predicted to happen happened. We're starting to see the leveling off and the coming down that Dr. Birx had mentioned. But it's important to remember that this is not the time to feel that since we have made such important advance in the sense of success of the mitigation, that we need to be pulling back at all.
Wouldn't that be horrible?
I was actually hearkened by the fact that we've been talking about
Like there's
New
another
York,
hot
New
spot.
Jersey, New Orleans, and other areas where they have really big spikes. But there's other parts of the country, in the middle parts of the country, where they're concerned to make sure they don't get those spikes. And I really want to salute the governors of states throughout the entire United States, but particularly in the central part of the country, because the governors obviously see us in these press conferences. And I've had calls over the last several days from several of the governors, from Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, Utah. Just about an hour and a half ago, I spoke with the governors of Arkansas and Wyoming, who are really committed to make sure
that they don't get into the situation where they're going to have spikes in their state. And they're doing the kinds of things that they don't get recognized because people don't talk about them much. But we have a big country. We have 50 states, and it's not only the big cities. So if we're going to pull out of this, we're going to pull out of it in the big cities, and we're going to pull out of it in those areas that aren't as densely populated. And I just want to give a shout out to them. They're doing an extraordinary job. I was really pleasant. I wouldn't say surprised because I expect it of this country, but to hear what they're doing and the commitment that they're putting into making sure that we don't have the kinds of situations that we've experienced, unfortunately, in other areas. This is very important. I just want to close by one other thing, something I mentioned yesterday and the day before, that there are a lot of candidate interventions that are going into clinical trials. For those of you who are interested in it, I recommend you go to clinicaltrials.gov, and you'll see the design of a clinical trial, and you see that many of them are the randomized controlled trials that are the really gold standard of how you find out whether something really is safe and effective. And as the weeks and months, and it'll probably be months, sometime in the summer, we'll start to see which are working, which are not, and to focus on those that are we developing and will working. I'll be happy to answer questions later. Thank you.
Kind of broken. Find
Thank you, Mr.
study.
President.
Oh, I should try to get in the
White
study.
House Task Force has been very
let's do that
focused
after.
on increasing the supply of personal protective equipment for our great providers. I was one of those providers a few months ago, and I can tell you nothing is more important than making sure they have what they need. So in order to increase the supply of N95 masks, FDA has worked with industry and has now authorized 2 companies who will supply machines to sterilize N95 masks. Admiral Polovchek and FEMA are purchasing on behalf of U.S. government 60 sterilization machines, as mentioned by the President. And they will be positioned around the country to increase the amount of supply of N95 masks.
He was up there before, I forget.
Will be able to sterilize 80,000 N95 masks per day, and we hope to actually increase that further. The Vice President and the White House Task Force challenged us yesterday, and we responded as a team. FDA issued revised guidance regarding.
Oh, he's the FDA guy. I think he's FDA, maybe.
Gowns are another issue in terms of supply that we're looking forward on. This is not something that normally happens around the country, but issued this guidance. It's on our website now at FDA.
Yeah, he's
so there's
FDA.
Information about how hospitals can do that to increase the supply. We've heard concerns that maybe hospitals might not want to do that because of regulations, and I can happy to tell you that Administrator Verma and I have worked on this. Certified providers and suppliers who follow FDA guidance as posted on the website will be compliant with Medicare and Medicaid requirements. And then finally, last week, FDA it provided guidance to manufacturers on manufacturing specifications for cloth gowns. This is another attempt to increase the number of gowns. Typically, it's plastic or other types of materials. And this guidance, if followed, can be used by manufacturers to actually make these gowns, and no further regulatory red tape will be necessary. They can go into circulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone. I started off the week talking about the challenges that lie ahead, and I want to finish the week just by reiterating what you've heard. Mitigation works. It definitively and quantitatively is working, and I want to say thank you to America for your efforts to help flatten the curve and to save lives. But at the President's direction, yesterday I met with 2,000 Hispanic leaders from their communities.
Yeah,
and
he gives
today,
very contradictory
the Vice President led a
information.
phone call that I was on with hundreds of African American leaders, including the Reverend Jesse Jackson, including Derek Johnson of the NAACP, including the National Medical Association and the Black Nurses Association, to talk about some of the alarming trends we're observing regarding the impact of COVID-19 on communities of color. And you've heard the stats in New York City. Hispanics represent the majority of deaths. In Milwaukee County, blacks are 25% of the population, but almost 50% of the cases and 75% of the deaths. So what's going on? Well, it's alarming, but it's not surprising that people of color have a greater burden of chronic health conditions. African Americans and Native Americans, develop high blood pressure at much younger ages. It's less likely to be under control and does greater harm to their organs. Puerto Ricans have higher rates of asthma, and black boys are 3 times as likely to die of asthma as their white counterparts. As a matter of fact, I've been carrying around an inhaler in my pocket for 40 years out of fear of having a fatal asthma attack.
Wow.
And I hope that showing you this inhaler shows little kids with asthma all across the country that they can grow up to be Surgeon General one day. But I more immediately share it so that everyone knows it doesn't matter if you look fit, if you look young, you are still at risk for getting and spreading and dying from coronavirus. The chronic burden of medical ills is likely to make people of color, especially, less resilient to the ravages of COVID-19, and is possibly, in fact, likely that the burden of social ills is also contributing. Social distancing and teleworking we know are critical, and you've heard Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci talk about how they prevent the spread of coronavirus, yet only 1 in 5 African Americans and 1 in 6 Hispanics has a job that lets them work from home. People of color are more likely to live in densely packed areas and in multi-generational housing situations, which create higher risk for spread of a highly contagious disease like COVID-19. We tell people to wash their hands, but a study showed 30% of the homes on Navajo Nation don't have running water.
Wow.
So how are they going to do that? In summary, people of color experience both more likely exposure to COVID-19 and increased complications from it. But let me be crystal clear. We do not think people of color are biologically or genetically predisposed to get COVID-19. There is nothing inherently wrong with you, but they are socially predisposed to coronavirus exposure and to have a higher incidence of the very diseases that put you at risk for severe complications of coronavirus. But as the Vice President shared on the call this morning, this history, and I want you to hear me say this, it does not have to be our nation's future. We're taking steps now in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic to reach, protect, and strengthen all communities impacted by this disease, and especially our communities of color. More details will be forthcoming, but we are actively working, as the Vice President and CDC Director laid out today, data collection, targeted outreach to communities of color, and increasing financial, employment, education, housing, social, and health supports so that everybody has an equal chance to be healthy. And I want to close by saying that while your state and local health departments and those of us in public service are working day and night to help stop the spread of COVID-19 and to protect you regardless of your color, your creed, or your geography, I need you to know you are not helpless. And it's even more important that in communities of color, we adhere to the task force guidelines to slow the spread. Stay at home if possible. If you must go out, maintain 6 feet of distance between you and everyone else, and wear a mask if you're going to be within 6 feet of others. Wash your hands more often than you ever dreamed possible. Avoid alcohol, tobacco, and drugs. And call your friends and family. Check in on your mother. She wants to hear from you right now. And speaking of mothers, we need you to do this, if not for yourself, then for your abuela. Do it for your granddaddy. Do it for your big mama. Do it for your pop-pop. We need you to understand, especially in communities of color, we need you to step up and help stop the spread so that we can protect those who are most vulnerable.
I don't think it's...
This epidemic is a tragedy, but it will be all the more tragic if we fail to recognize and address the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 and an array of other diseases and risk factors on communities of color. The task force and this administration are determined not to let that happen. The President, the Vice President has said we will not let that happen. We can't fix these issues overnight, but I promise you we will work with your communities to quickly and meaningfully move the needle in the right direction. Nothing less than the fate of our families and friends, my family and friends.
Hey, Chef 420, what's up? We're early today. I don't know why they went so early.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, the White House Coronavirus Task Force met and
perfect time, you think?
And heard from the president.
It's good for me because then
the gratitude
after this is done, I can go do some work. But I was just in the middle of some work.
Feel for all the dedicated workers at FEMA, HHS, U.S. Public Health Service, FDA, and all those that are literally working on your behalf around the clock to partner with states, to partner with local health officials, and Mr. President, allow me to add my thanks. And
I hope it will be. I don't know. I haven't even really started writing yet.
At the federal level. On this Good Friday, we remember those who've lost their lives to the coronavirus. We remember their families, our dedicated healthcare workers, and our first responders. and we do well on this.
You didn't really miss
special
much,
day
Beep.
for Christians.
I mean,
across
I
the
missed
country.
10 minutes of it. I
Remember
don't know
them
what
in our
happened.
prayers.
But
But as you just heard from Dr. Burks and from the experts,
they say we're doing
also a
okay.
good day to remember that
He's so
Good
boring.
Friday is always followed by Easter Sunday.
Hey, thanks for
There's
following, Winning Spy.
There's hope in this moment that thanks to what the American people are doing every day, adhering to the president's coronavirus guidelines for America, thanks to the fact that Americans are listening to state and local leaders and putting the health of their family members and
He
their
looks like
first.
Eminem. Does he?
We're getting there, America. We're making progress. But it's imperative that we all continue to implement all
I guess
of the
he kinda
guidance
does.
in the 30 days to slow the spread. As the Surgeon General just attested, at the President's direction, we engaged more than 400 leaders in the African American community today, and allow me to express my appreciation for their leadership and their efforts in communicating to African Americans and other minority populations some of the unique challenges that those communities face in the midst of this epidemic. And the CDC, as the Surgeon General said, is working on not only studying the issue, but very rapidly issuing new guidance, and we'll be communicating that new guidance to all of those great leaders. On the subject of testing and supplies, the President gave a great amount of detail. More than 2.1 million tests have been performed, and we continue to work very, very closely with FDA and suppliers around the country to expand the ability of testing. And you just heard Dr. Hahn reflect on the fact that very soon we will have an antibody test.
He does kind of look like him, huh?
Americans will be able to take to determine whether they ever had the coronavirus. I spoke today to the governor of Colorado, Jared Polis. We've been in contact with Senator Cory Gardner about an outbreak at a particular meatpacking facility in the Colorado area. And at this time, our team
Increasing
is
testing,
working
that's
with the
good.
governor and working with the senator.
They're starting,
flow testing resources. At this point, there are some 14 people hospitalized. Maybe
Yikes.
200 to 300 of the workforce have been impacted.
Wow.
And,
That's a lot at one
we spoke
one
about
meat
providing
packing
those
place.
resources this weekend. I want to encourage people in Colorado that we will work to support that effort, but I also want to emphasize that all the people that are working in food supply, from farmers to meat packers to distributors,
What's Maple
to
Leaf,
truckers,
Clout?
to grocers, continue to have our gratitude, as President Trump said just a few moments ago. On supplies, more than $5 billion have been obligated to the states. 29,600 National Guard have been activated, and at the President's direction, more than 4,700 active duty military personnel.
It's in
have been
Colorado.
deployed,
I don't know.
Medical military personnel in 9 states, focusing on the areas of most significant epidemic. Airbridge, 26 flights have been completed. 4 flights are scheduled to arrive today, bringing 250,000 gowns, 25 million pairs of gloves. 54 more flights are scheduled, literally bringing in supplies from around
Tyson, one of the world's.
Finally, let me say, as we go into this very special
Wow.
weekend,
Maybe we'll run out of
Easter
meat.
services, I know I speak on
This is
behalf
a different one.
of the
Major
president
meat processor shutting
when I
down.
say how grateful we
Oops.
are to all of the churches that have been there, and their ministries have been working under great difficulty to continue to provide for the needs of your members. There have been food drives, there have been phone calls, and ministry has continued, and we are grateful for the role.
I
this
just got a
Holy
shitload
Week
of
that
bacon,
churches,
so I'm
our
okay.
synagogues, and all of our houses of worship have played. On their behalf, allow me to remind you that even if you're not in the pew this Easter Sunday, if you are able,
book's
it's still
bored,
a good
yeah.
idea to give, because
Why do
the
they?
ministries continue
It's
to
just
go
funny that he
forward.
stands like
We
right in the
encourage you.
frame on the
We
corner, and just
encourage you
like
to continue to support them. We also
He looks
want to
like
say
a-
very respectfully to all the church communities.
he looks like an NPC in a video
all the
game who's
places
just
of
doing like
worship.
the idle
Continue to
motion,
be
you know?
the guidelines issued in the President's coronavirus guidelines for America. We know it's difficult in this time of year, particularly, Mr. President, to avoid gatherings
Swaying.
of more than 10. But we're grateful that so many churches, synagogues, and places of worship have done just that, and we urge you to continue to do it. And to my Christian brothers and sisters across the country, let me encourage you with the words. We should all remember that Jesus
That's
said,
getting too
"Wherever
much
2 or
credit. I
more
don't think
are
he's worried about
gathered,
that.
there he is also." And so you can worship, you can celebrate Easter, and know that you'll be blessed in so doing, and you'll be serving the nation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah. Well, Pence is the leader of the task force, right? Great
Okay,
job, he says.
it's Good Friday, let's be nice. Okay, let's be real nice. Yeah, let's go.
Oh my
Can
God.
you clarify a little bit what the U.S. offered to Mexico in order to agree to that oil
Yeah.
deal? And then also go into detail about what you spoke about on oil with President Putin this morning.
So all of the OPEC nations met, and others, and they're all agreeing to cut back because there's a tremendous glut. We're filling up our strategic reserves. We don't even have room to store
Is
it.
that true, Kips?
In
Is
fact, they're using ships to store
50%?
oil. There's never been anything like this.
yeah, Beep. He's
It was being
he's
overproduced
not
to start
nice.
off with, and then you had the virus, and that
To anybody
took
who
off
disagrees with
40%
him.
right there. So we have there's a glut of oil like nobody's ever seen before. It's good in many ways, and depending on where you are, who you are, it's bad. We have a tremendous energy business with hundreds of thousands of jobs. We're doing great, number one in the world. So they all got together and they said we're going to cut it because we have to get rid of this tremendous
You
supply.
have to cut it. I was
Now,
just
the good
listening to that
news
song.
is, gasoline prices, I'm seeing 90
Food price
cents,
is way too
85
high.
cents in different parts of the
You
country.
need to cut it.
Yeah, nobody's ever seen that. I guess you have to go back to the 1950s.
Yeah, no one has ever
to
seen
large
that.
dollar bills. Remember? You don't remember. You're too young. But the fact that you have to go back a long ways to see it. So there's some good. The airlines are trying to come back. Having low fuel costs is good for them. And other reasons. Steel manufacturing, but a lot of the steel goes to building what we do for the oil and engineering firms. So, that's a double-edged sword. But we want to keep our energy. We want to remain independent. We will remain independent, I think, regardless. But we want to get rid of this tremendous overflow. There's no place to even store it. So the OPEC nations met. They've been meeting, and I've hated OPEC over the years. Absolutely hated them. But obviously, it broke down, and we potentially have years worth of supply, a long time before it ever can catch up, even if they do reduce it. And they agreed, but Mexico didn't agree. It was one of the few countries that didn't agree. This is OPEC plus. These are OPEC plus countries outside. You understand? And Mexico didn't agree. And I understand the president
Keeps his
very
energy
well.
with
He has
Sudafed.
trouble when he came in, and he wanted to keep it at that level. Oil is important for Mexico. The problem is,
Got this
and I
pink
explained
tie
to
on
this
today.
story, you're going to be selling it for $5 or
guess
$10 a
Good
barrel.
Friday,
So
Easter.
In the end, it's bad.
Is it Easter? It's almost Easter,
But
huh?
he did have some
even know.
political difficulty with it, frankly, and I understand that too. And it's a small amount for us. It's a large amount for Mexico, but it's a very small amount. for
Easter is
the
Sunday.
United
Okay.
States being the
Well,
biggest producer.
time to open the country. Yep.
So I agreed to pick up some of the slack. So he was going to reduce it by 100,000 barrels, reduce his output by 100,000 barrels. And I was going to pick up the slack, and they would make it up to us at a later date. They would make up what we're doing at a later date. It could be in a different form. And I don't know whether or not that's going to be, for Mexico it was acceptable. I don't know whether or not that's going to be acceptable to the other oil-producing nations. We'll find out. But it's something that would certainly be acceptable to me to get it over the back. So Mexico is going to reduce by 100,000 barrels. And that would mean that they're 250 to 300 barrels short. We'd make up the difference. They would reimburse us at a later date. Okay?
You mean make up the difference by cutting U.S. production?
By cutting some U.S. production. Now, the U.S. production's already been cut because we're a market-driven economy, and oil is very market-driven. They've been cutting oil all over the place. We're cutting it back. And what does it mean, really? It means we have it in the ground, we can use it. Now, we have a lot of ground with a lot of oil in it. I think we're number one in that, too. We're probably number one, especially with ANWR. As you know, I got ANWR approved in Alaska. That's one of the biggest finds anywhere in the world. So when you add it all up, I think we're probably number one, even in what we have under. We're very lucky. We grew up in a land that was rich in a lot of ways, but it's also rich because it has a lot of oil underneath, oil and gas. And as you know, natural gas, LNG, is all over the country now at a very low price. And our carbon, our atmosphere, the level of
We're number one in coronavirus.
is at its all-time best right now. All-time best. Because we are using a lot of natural gas. But we have many forms of energy, including some of the newer forms that people want to see us go
Yep.
to. We have a lot of different forms of energy. We're number one in the world. We want to keep it that way. So we're helping Mexico out. We will be reimbursed in a form sometime in the future.
Mr. President, I want to ask you about the new federal projections in a moment, but first, today you tweeted the invisible enemy will soon be in full retreat. Given it's invisible, without widespread testing, how would you know?
Well, I think that we're going to have it in retreat.
This guy is very
Today,
TV ready,
no,
huh?
Tomorrow, no, but it will
He's the
be
CNN guy?
at a certain point in the not too distant future. It will be gone.
And how do you do that without the widespread testing? Specifically, my
Oh,
question.
we'll know, because people aren't going to go to the hospital. People aren't going to get sick. You're going to know that with that. But we're going to do very substantial testing. We're doing more testing right now than any other country in the world by far. And if you'd like to have that question answered, I'll have the professional answer it. Deborah, perhaps you could come up. We are doing tremendous testing. But
I got a cough.
You're going to know before anybody.
I think it's
Nobody's
allergies.
getting sick anymore. It will be gone, and it won't be that much longer. Go ahead.
I'll ask you about the projections after. Thanks, Mr. President.
Lawrence
Thank you, Mr.
Cat.
President. So
I did say
the
that.
testing. I
don't know, I feel fine.
emphasize about what kind of testing we're talking about. This is RNA diagnostic testing. That is the platform that was built to respond to this epidemic. It is the same platform that we utilize for HIV viral loads. And so many HIV clients have also given up their space on the machines to have these tests run for all of Americans. This assay is complicated. It's not like an assay that you have for your other diseases, your strep test or other diseases like that. This is a very complicated assay that requires
Got a
lot of
downbeat
technical
scarf today.
oversight, and it's part of the reason why not all 100% our machines are running at full capacity, but we had great discussion with the lab directors about that.
Where's her accent
Every
from?
day more are brought online.
Interesting accent.
And so, but I think we have to create expectations of what the daily test rates will be. Last year, we probably did 3 million HIV viral loads or 4 million HIV viral loads as a country. We've done over almost 2.2 million in 4 weeks. So this is
Lancaster
unprecedented in what we
County,
have to do.
Pennsylvania.
I think that's why we're working very hard for two pieces.
And then
I wanna make
Carlisle,
sure that people
Pennsylvania.
understand testing is just part of our strategy. The other part of the strategy has to be this syndromic and influenza-like illness where there's an alert to an illness, and so that we're surveying where we know the most vulnerable cases have appeared. And the great call that I had with the mayors and with the health officials yesterday and mayors today, a lot of the rural areas, their primary, and as it was in Washington and California, was at the nursing homes. So the issue is to build a testing strategy that speaks to our strengths of laser focusing a strategic approach to testing when we know what our volumes are, and they increase every day, but we have to be realistic about what the volumes will be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, and combine that with strategic surveillance so that we're testing symptomatic people and their contacts very quickly to go back to contact tracing, utilizing our complete strategy. And I think we're very much interested, and it's why the president 3 weeks ago really put us on getting an antibody test. And I think I called from the podium for our university colleagues.
We need an antibody test.
Begin an ELISA
They're starting
test, 'cause
they're
that's the
starting
blood
in
draw. But we really wanted a finger prick to make it easy and deployable.
In LA.
That's what's being worked on now. Of course, we don't want to promise until we have it, because I think we deserve that. The American people deserve that, to have a test that is efficient to let people know who's been positive for immunity.
I don't know.
That's critical to epidemiologists and public health officials to know.
I haven't heard
what
any
the
mo about that.
penetrance of a virus was into a community when all you're seeing are the serious cases and testing the most symptomatic. And so that's a question that we still have. Is this the tip of the iceberg, or is this half the iceberg or 3/4 of the iceberg, what we have seen today?
Discuss the
And
possibility
we have,
of
I just
reopening
want
the
to
country when the event.
complete the thought by saying, in the areas where we had an outbreak, these large metros, Louisiana, Denver, Detroit,
Yeah,
Chicago,
we're beyond
New York,
that, Hank J.
DC. But per capita,
Chef, I
we've
would
done
love a
more
cheeseburger
tests
myself,
than
actually.
any other place in the world. That was intentional. We focused the test where the need was the greatest and the burden of disease the greatest. And now we're trying to really see how strategically that very valuable resource can be utilized around the countries to create a mosaic of testing
Schroomberger.
combined with surveillance.
No.
Can I ask you about the new federal projections?
I have been trying to
The
eat
new reporting
less
today, The
meat.
new federal projections suggest lifting. I'd like to ask you, if I can, about the new federal projections that suggest lifting the 30-day shelter-in-place orders would lead to a spike in infections. Have you seen those new projections from your Department of Homeland Security and HHS,
I
first
have
of all?
not. When did they say this would take place?
I was reading this.
They said that it would take place if the 30-day shelter in place were to be removed. There's three different.
This is from the New York Times.
Doctor, would you like to talk
Does that
about that?
impact your thinking, though? That those...
I haven't, they haven't seen it. I guess you're seeing, I guess they leaked it.
This
to
one right
NBC.
here.
They didn't leak it to us. It's being reported by
Nobody's
others.
seen it, and they're the ones that do it.
It's just
So
administration, so I asked. It's from the HHS and DOJ. I'll circle back.
we'll
and
find out about it.
This is what they say. It will like go up
someone
again.
Want to say something, Ken?
First of all, Peter, I haven't seen that, so I can't quote on that. But yeah, that's okay. I still haven't seen it. I've been in here all day.
I'm just telling you what I know.
So what I think that they're talking about is that whenever you pull back, you would expect that you might start seeing cases. And what we've been talking about, what Dr. Birx has just mentioned, is that when you see that, that's where you want your resources to be able to very efficiently, in real time, identify, isolate, and contact trace. So don't let anyone get any false ideas that when we decide at a proper time when we're going to be relaxing some of the restrictions, there's no doubt you're going to see cases. I would be so surprised if we did not see cases. The question is how you respond to them. I think that's what they were referring to.
I guess the question, Mr. President, should Americans have to decide between staying healthy and going back to work?
Look, I think we're going to do both. We're going to go back to work, and we're going to stay healthy. And staying healthy is also a proportion. If you look at what we're doing, we're looking at a date. We hope we're going to be able to fulfill a certain date, but we're not doing anything until we know that this country is going to be healthy. We don't want to go back and start doing it over again, even though it would be in a smaller scale. Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Just a follow-up on the oil question. The president of Mexico said that you had agreed that the U.S. would cut production by 250,000 barrels per day. Is that what you agreed to?
Yes, we would, which we've already done, by the way, but we would agree to a reduction cut. They would agree to do something to compensate us in the future. Okay?
Did you make any assurances to Saudi Arabia that you, the United States, would not bail out oil drillers here?
We didn't discuss that with Saudi Arabia. We just discussed the numbers, and we discussed who's opposed and who's not. And pretty much everybody is in favor of it because they're getting clobbered. They're all getting clobbered. All of those countries are having problems. If you look at Saudi Arabia, that's their source of income, primary source of income by far. So they want to do it. Russia wants to do it. The OPEC nations want to do it. They all want to do it. So we'll see what happens. There's a difference between wanting to do it and doing it. Yeah, go ahead. OAN in the back.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a national security question back to Venezuela and China.
Venezuela,
this morning.
go ahead.
Your administration has placed a $15 million bounty on Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro. And we have news this morning that President Xi is talking with Nicolas Maduro, expressing his financial support for Maduro. So 2 questions. One, have you discussed with Dr. Xi, or President Xi, the U.S. policy on Maduro? And 2, how does this affect U.S. policy with regards to its war on anti-narcotics?
We will not be happy if that takes place. I have not spoken to President Xi of China about Venezuela, about that aspect of Venezuela.
Yep.
But if that took place, we will not be
OAN.
happy.
OANN over
I
there.
will not be
Are
happy.
you concerned that he's opening
She's
up
out there
the
because
financial
everything.
basically she doesn't have an official spot,
That's why I
but
don't sleep a lot. I get myself concerned about everything, but I would not be happy about that. Go ahead.
President,
But
getting back
Trump
to
lets
Peter's
her-
question,
lets their sta- lets her
variation
stay
of
in.
That question, your doctors who are gathered here seem to be in doubt as to whether or not the country can reopen on May the 1st. If they come to you before May the 1st and say the country is not ready, or huge parts of the country are not ready to reopen on May the 1st, will you listen to them?
I listen to them about everything. I think they're actually surprised. I have great respect for these people, all of them. You
that
look,
recommendation
and
in
others
particular,
that are working with us. I have great respect for this group. In fact, I told Tony Fauci, I said, why don't you move to New York, run against AOC easily.
oh
He
my
decided that he's not going to do
God.
that. Okay. I kid, by the way. You know that.
Some of your allies have been bashing these doctors. Would you tell them to cut it out?
I can only say this. I have tremendous respect for these people, and we've done very well. And when you look at us compared to others, we're a big nation. When you look at us compared to others, when you see how we've taken testing from a broken system that I inherited to having the best tests that anyone's made anywhere in the world, and other countries are calling us, wanting to use our technology. I have great respect for these people. I'm never saying bad about these people.
If they come back to you, sir, and say, before May the 1st, we can't open on May the 1st, do you listen?
I will certainly listen. I will certainly listen.
You take that
There are two
advice.
sides. Remember, I understand the other side of the argument very well, because I look at both sides of an argument. I will listen to them very carefully, though. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. You may have seen this, but J.P. Morgan came out with a forecast about GDP growth in the second quarter. They're saying a 40% decline in the second quarter of this year. Do your economic advisors share that view?
I think my economic advisors are interested in the third quarter and really the fourth quarter. And I think we have a chance to do record fourth quarter numbers because there's a tremendous pent-up demand. And you see it this week. I mean, what reason would there be other than faith in us and in this country, faith in this group, and me and our vice president and everybody, governors perhaps, you can add them into it also. What reason would there be for, in a shortened week, 4 days instead of 5, to have the biggest stock market gain in over 50 years? So I think that, to me, there's a sign. Hey, look, with all we've been down, I mean, we've never been hit. I don't know. Has this country ever
Hey,
been
Clout.
hit like this?
Good night.
Probably not. 1917, but that was different, and it was a different time. And frankly, Europe took the brunt of it. We didn't, but it was a terrible time also. But probably never been hit like this, right? Somebody was saying, in fact, I was speaking with Governor Cuomo about it because we were in New York City, a place we love, New York State, with the World Trade Center. And that was approximately.
What did he say
3,000
up to his
we've doubled that.
supporters who are attacking Fauci? He just said
Same
he
area,
respects
we've
him.
doubled that, more than double it, substantially more, and it's obviously going. We had our highest number yesterday and the day before. Okay, with all of this news, what would lead you to believe that we're going to have the best stock market week, shortened week, in 50 years? Almost broke the all-time record. You know what that is? That's a pent-up demand. Now, that's my opinion. The other thing is we're doing tremendous stimulus plans. And despite what you're reading, there's back and forth, but we are getting along with the Democrats. They want to see something happen. We have to help our workers. We have to help our small businesses. We have to help our restaurants. I think deductibility will be great for entertainment, restaurants, all of that. Look, I think with the stimulus, with the people, with what we've got going, with all of the things, we're going to be meeting with the airlines over the weekend. Where we have a great plan for the airlines. We've got to keep the airlines.
I feel
going.
this.
It's never been
I
a
feel
great
this right
business,
here.
but it's a very vital business. We're going to be meeting with
how I
Boeing.
feel.
We're going to be meeting with a lot of companies that are great companies and were great companies a short while ago. I mean, we can't let anything happen to Boeing.
No, I'm still drinking for
It's,
sure.
got so much
More
potential.
than ever.
Potential. Can anything have more potential than that? So we have a lot of very exciting things taking place. We have tremendous plans. We have tremendous stimulus. And I think we have a chance to do really well. So this quarter isn't the quarter I'm looking at. Third quarter, we start to think about it. And I think fourth quarter is going to be at a level that maybe we haven't seen before. I think our country, with the stimulus, with all that we've been through, we've learned a lot. Don't forget, we've learned about pandemics and epidemics. We've learned a tremendous amount. And with all that we've learned, as an example, we're making ventilators. We have thousands of them being delivered in the very near future. We have countries calling us, can we have ventilators?
Wow, Midge. I feel like I need to take a week off. I've been drinking too much.
They have people dying, but we needed
It's
them
true.
for ourselves. We have plenty before the surge. In New York, they need far fewer hospital rooms.
It's just hard now,
far fewer
though,
hospital beds in particular than we thought. And I have to say, Dr. Birx told me that 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. Remember, you said, that number's too high. We don't need that many. And based on what she said and others, we did what we had to do. We actually gave the maximum. We built Javits. We sent the ship in. We then made the ship COVID because, there weren't a lot of people on the roads. You didn't have the accidents.
Yeah,
driving.
methylamino. I feel you.
Car accidents. You have a lot of motorcycle accidents. You have people going to the hospital. We didn't have that. We had almost none of it. So a lot of things have happened. I think we have a chance to be stronger than before. I really do. I think the stimulus is very important, what we're doing. I think it's very, very important. Please, go ahead.
Mr. President, may I ask you about credit and debt as well? Many American individuals, families have had to tap their credit cards during this period of time, and businesses have had to draw down their credit lines. Are you concerned, Mr. President, that may hobble the U.S. economy? All of that debt, number one. And number two, would you suggest to credit card companies to reduce their fees during this time?
I'm making cocktails. I'm drinking wine out of the box.
Business interruption insurance. I'd like to see these insurance companies. You know, you have people that have paid.
I got like a bar going on here.
I had business interruption. When my
Lauren and I
business was
like to
interrupted
drink.
through a
No, I'm with my
hurricane,
girlfriend Lauren.
I have business where I had it. I didn't always have it. Sometimes I had it. Sometimes I have a lot of different companies. But if I had it, I'd expect to be paid. You have people. I speak mostly to the restaurateurs where they have a restaurant. They've been paying for 25, 30, 35 years. Business interruption. They've never needed it. All of a sudden, they need it.
I bought like a giant bottle of bourbon. Been working my way through that.
And
making some
I don't
Manhattans.
see the word pandemic mentioned. Now, in some cases it is. It's an exclusion. But in a lot of cases, I don't see it. I don't see reference, and they don't want to pay up. I would like to see the insurance companies pay if they need to pay, if it's fair. And they know what's fair, and I know what's fair. I can tell you very quickly. But business interruption insurance, that's getting a lot of money to a lot of people. And they've been paying for years. You know, sometimes they just started paying. But you have people that have never asked for business interruption insurance, and they've been paying a lot of money for a lot of years.
When will I
for the
start
privilege
drinking?
Of having it. And then
You
when
know,
they
like
finally
6
need it, the
6
insurance
p.m. usually,
companies are
cocktail
willing to
hour.
give it.
I don't drink during the
You
day.
can't let that happen.
Lauren likes to drink during the day. I don't drink during the day.
Can get a test. Now you're saying that you would be open to reopening the government without having a national testing system. How do you square those two statements, given that there's still issues with?
Yeah, I guess that's why.
And how can you tell people
Well, there's not
that
a
they're
lot
not
of
going to have
issues
their
with
lives
this.
put at
Yeah,
risk?
Well,
there's
cheers,
not a lot,
cheers,
and it's a good
methyl
question.
amino.
There's not a lot of issues with testing. Certain sections of if we go to Iowa, we go to Nebraska, and interestingly, Idaho is very interesting because they had a few breakouts, small breakouts, but they're very, very capable states, and they're big distances, a lot of land, a lot of opening. You don't need testing there. You know, where you have a state with a small number of cases, some states with almost none. West Virginia hung in for a long time, as you know, with none for a long time. So when you have that, you don't need testing. You don't have to test every person in the state of Iowa as an example.
Cheers. What time is it where you are?
Just every single person
Day drinking?
to say, let's open up and let's get the tractors moving and let's get the corn and let's open up all
10
of the
p.m.,
different
hell yeah.
things they do in that great state. You don't need that. And with that being said, if there's a little hot
I'm
corn
a bourbon
someplace,
guy myself.
we'll be testing. But I think
Whiskey.
Deborah speaks to this very well. The same thing in New York. That's what we talked to Governor Cuomo about this morning. We have the Abbott test, which is very quick and very easy, goes very fast. Then we have a lesser test that we talked about where we can talk about a larger area. But you're going to know. So we're going to do testing, but you don't need to test 325 to 350 million people because, number one, it's unnecessary. Vast numbers, vast areas of our country don't need.
Do you think he knows what he's talking about?
Agree with
I
me
don't
on that.
think
You
he
just
knows
don't
what he's
need
talking
it.
about.
Now, we have
Rural
certain
countries are-
hotspots.
rural
Louisiana's
counties
a
are getting
hotspot,
hit.
New York's a hotspot. Detroit's a hotspot. And then you have certain areas in certain hotspots that you have to even go more so. And we're doing all of that. Remember this, we've done more testing than any country in the world. And we have the best test. And we developed this over a very short period of time. Please.
Can I ask you also about the African American disparities?
Yes,
I have
sure.
a question for you and a question for the Surgeon General.
Sure.
For you, Mr. President, we know that these health disparities have existed for a long time among African Americans, Latinos, and other people of color. Why did the administration possibly have a plan directed at those communities to prevent high death rates, knowing that the health disparities were there?
It's a good question.
And one of the things
She always asks really good questions.
What I've been able to do for the African American community, the lowest job numbers in the history of our country. This was
For the virus, of course.
just before the virus came. Well, I'm just saying because this has been here for 3 weeks, right? So just before, African American community had the lowest unemployment, the best employment numbers. More African American people and communities have been thriving. If you look at our opportunity zones and what we did, Tim Scott is fantastic, a fantastic senator, came to me, opportunity zones, more jobs for African Americans than ever before, better health care than they've ever had before. All of these things. The Surgeon General spoke to it, and he spoke to it, I thought, really brilliantly. I found it very interesting. And I'd love you to come up and answer the second part of a question, because I think you would do it a much better job than I would. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Surgeon General. Thank you. I have a quick question for you. You said that African Americans and Latinos should avoid alcohol, drugs, and tobacco. You also said do it for your abuela, do it for Big Mama, and Pop Pop. There are some people already there are some people online that are already offended by that language and the idea that you're saying behaviors might be leading to these high death rates. Could you talk about whether or not could you, I guess, have a response for people who might be offended by the language that you used?
Well, I use that language because that's the language. I've been meeting with the NAACP, with the National Medical Association, with others. I actually talked with Derek Johnson multiple times this week, the head of the NAACP, and we need targeted outreach to the African American community, and I use the language that is used in my family. I have a Puerto Rican brother-in-law. I call my granddaddy, granddaddy. I have relatives who call their grandparents Big Mama. So that was not meant to be offensive. That's the language that we use and that I use, and we need to continue to target our outreach to those communities. It is critically important that they understand it's not just about them, and I was very clear about that. It's not just about what you do, but you also are not helpless. We need to do our part at the federal level. We need people to do their parts at the state level, and we need everyone, black, brown, white, whatever color you are, to follow the president's guidelines, the coronavirus guidelines, and do their part. Because when I talked to the NAACP 3 weeks ago, it's important to note that one of the things they asked me was, can you help dispel the myths in this community that people actually can't get coronavirus if they're black? That was a myth that was out there that's actually very important for us to squash here.
And that all Americans avoid tobacco, alcohol, and drug use at this time?
Absolutely. It's especially important for people who are at risk and with comorbidities, but yes, all Americans. So thank you, and I will clarify that. All Americans need to avoid these substances at all times. I put out a smoking cessation report in January. I put out an advisory against youth and pregnant women using marijuana last year, and that was not directed towards any one race. That's everybody needs to do everything they can to be as healthy as possible at this critical time. Dr. Fauci, would you add anything?
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly, Jerome. Thank you. Would you like to add anything to it? Because you are really, you expressed it very beautifully before.
No, I mean, Jerome, you did it beautifully. I can't do it any better than that. And I know Jerome personally, and I can just testify that he made not even a hint of being offensive at all. I thought that was appropriate. Thanks.
Okay.
And I can tell you, Jerome has done a fantastic job, our Surgeon General. I just hope nobody steals him and he goes to one of these big companies for a fortune. Don't leave us, right? Don't leave us, Jerome, please. He's doing a great, you are happy and you're doing a great job. And everybody tells me that too. So
cringe. This is cringe.
Please.
Thank you. So Google and Apple have announced that they are jointly enabling.
Oh yeah, this just came out.
On their mobile phone.
This is kind of creepy. We should look at this after.
This is something that you would consider, or maybe the doctors
Yeah, that's
would
individual
consider.
freedoms, problems, and a lot of other things. Is it something we're going to look at it certainly, and we know they've done that, and it's it's very new technology. It's very interesting, but a lot of people worry about it in terms of a person's freedom. We're going to take a look at that, a very strong look at it. We'll let you know pretty soon.
And I have another
Brand
question.
new, yes, please.
So can you explain why it is appropriate in the middle of a pandemic to be talking about cutting or eliminating funding for the World Health Organization?
Well, we're going to talk about the WHO next week in great detail. I didn't want to do it today, Good Friday. I didn't want to do it before Easter. I also didn't want to do it before we have all the facts. But over the years, many years, we've been paying them from $300 to $500 and even more $1 million a year. China's been paying them less than 40 over the years. So we're paying them more than 10 times more than China. And they are very, very China-centric, as I said during the week, China-centric. China always seems to get the better of the argument. And
Wait,
I don't
what's
like
he
that.
talking about?
don't like
I was
that. I don't think it's
zoned out.
appropriate. I don't think it's fair to the American people. And, you know, I tell that to President Xi. I tell that to
Oh, the
Dr.
WHO, right?
Tedros. I spoke to him one time.
He says they're
I think he's
biased
a very
towards
nice
China,
guy.
right?
But we're going to be talking about that next week in great detail. We're looking at it very, very closely. We want to make sure money's properly spent. But again, why is the United States paying $500 million a year? It's a lot. And why is, okay, that's a lot. And why is China paying this year, $42 million, but generally under 40, so it's in the 30s. So we're at 500, 452, 400, 401, different amounts, different years. And they're at 40, 38, 36, 35, 32, 31. No, but you have to ask yourself that question. And then the answer always turns out to be in China's favor. Well, I have the same thing with the world trade. Isn't it interesting? World trade. So we have World Health and we have World Trade. So we have the World Trade Organization. And until I came along, we were losing cases, so many cases, it was ridiculous. We were always losing these cases, I mean, almost every case. And now we're winning cases. We just won $7 billion because they know I'm not going to put up with it. China has been unbelievable.
Come on, this is just like scapegoating, man.
Advantage of us and other countries. You know, for instance, they're considered a
Trump
developing nation.
fucked up.
I said, well, then make us a developing
Talking about
nation too.
World Trade Organization now.
Because they're a developing nation. India, a developing nation. The United States is the big developed nation. Well, we have plenty of development to do, okay? And now we're winning cases because they know that if we're not treated fairly, I'm going to pull out. Now, you never heard this before because nobody ever talked about the World Trade Organization, but the World Trade Organization has treated us very unfairly. But they know I'm not going to put up with it because all of these countries are taking advantage of the United States. Now, in the courts, and the courts...
Pepe Poseidon, where do you see that? You got a link?
Over the last year and a half. We're not going to approve them. And Bob Lighthizer is working very hard on that. But we had always a minority position, meaning numbers of judges. So we'd have a minority number of judges. I said, how do you win with a minority number of judges? But all of a sudden we're winning. And the reason we're winning is they know if they don't treat us properly, and we won $7 billion just this very recently.
This is just has nothing to do with anything.
And we won other cases too. We won a lot of cases. But you know, from covering it, I know you know, that the United States was taken advantage of by the World Trade Organization. And by the way, speaking of China, if you look at the history of China, it was only since they went into the World Trade Organization that they became a rocket ship with their economy. They were flatlined for years and years, frankly, for many, many decades. And it was only when they came into the World Trade Organization that they became a rocket ship because they took advantage of all the rules. I'm not even blaming
a journalist, not an opinion commentator.
Stupid were the people that
it's the same thing, man.
And allowed it to happen.
A journalist writes down things that happens. They can put it in their opinion.
Now we're starting to win cases. How about somebody new for a change? Come on, go ahead.
President, as many schools and school districts are closing across the country, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has not ruled out closing or opening out schools in May, saying that many kids are not vulnerable to this disease. Do you agree with that assessment, and do you believe that would you recommend that schools open up and to those states that have?
Well, I have a lot of confidence in Ron DeSantis, a lot of faith in Ron DeSantis to make the right decision. He's doing a great job as governor. Ron DeSantis, I had read where he's thinking about opening up the schools earlier than the date, the end of the month. I'd have to look at the numbers. But again, you know, I like to allow governors to make decisions without overruling them. Because from a constitutional standpoint, that's the way it should be done. If I disagreed, I would overrule a governor. And I have that right to do it. But
yeah, brainstorm, it sucks.
You can call it federalist, you can call it the Constitution, but I call it the Constitution. I would rather have them make their decisions. But he's made a lot of good decisions. And he hasn't said he's going to, but he's thinking about it, so I'll take a look at it.
If I can ask a follow-up to one of the doctors, that if you allow children back in the schools, wouldn't that pose a threat to spreading the virus even further to some of those vulnerable?
Well, I think the answer is obvious, but if you want, either, would you want to just talk about that, maybe? Tony? I know. I think we know the answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, from pure public health issues is that if you have a situation in which you don't have a real good control over an outbreak and you allow children to gather together, they likely will get infected. And if they get infected, the likelihood that they will bring the infection home. So that really is a risk. I don't know the situation at all in any detail, and I'm not specifically speaking about Florida. I'm just speaking generically about what happens when you have infections in the community and you have congregation of people, such as in classrooms, that's a risk.
Has anyone under 25 died, Dr. Fauci, in the country?
Yes.
The governor said that no one under 25 has died. I guess you could clarify that people under 25 can die as a result of this.
Maybe in Florida
Yeah, I'm not sure. Again,
in the country.
Okay.
Trying to start a fight.
Because I don't want to have to be answering for a particular state. Yes, people under 25 have died of coronavirus disease in the United States of America.
Yeah, Beep. It's like people's lives are on hold, right? Like imagine it's your last year and
There's a
then
new outbreak
just
or a spike in infections.
You're
Are
done.
you open to the idea of shutting the country down again?
Depending on the outbreak, yeah.
You would be
Depending. I mean, and that's happened, as you know, in a couple of countries. You know what I'm doing? I'm watching other countries. In many cases, they're ahead of us from the standpoint that it attacked them before us. It hit them first. And I'm watching
Watching
what's
other
happening
countries.
with respect to
I mean, that's
other
good.
countries. Some of them obvious, some of them less obvious, and what they're doing and the success that they're having. And that's going to play a large part of the role. We're also setting up a council of very, very great doctors and business people. We're going to be announcing it on Tuesday.
Okay. Well, that'll be interesting.
Economic task force.
There's a second task force?
This is beyond economic. This is really, I call it the Opening Our Country Task Force.
Opening Our
Country.
Who do you think is going to be on that?
Confused with Mike's task force.
A bunch of bad
which has
people.
done so great. And we're going to have the great business leaders, great doctors. We're going to have a great group of people. We'll probably do it by teleconference because we don't really want them traveling in for their own purposes. I don't think it would look good also, but we don't want them traveling in. So we'll do teleconference. We did one the other day with the banks, and it was very successful, the teleconference itself. And we'll be announcing names on Tuesday, who's on that. And that'll play a role, but ultimately I have to make that decision. And then I'll have to make a decision. Do we close a little area that's a hot spot? I do say this, Jim, I want to get it open as soon as possible. This country was meant to be open and vibrant and great, not where people are, staying and. No, I'm not. I would love to open it. I'm not determined anything. The facts are going to determine what I do. But we do want to get the country open. So important. So I'll have a task force. I'll have a council. It's going to be announced on Tuesday with names that you have a lot of respect for, a lot of great names, different businesses, different people, top bipartisan. I didn't even ask. I mean, honestly, I think it's bipartisan. The one thing I didn't ask, are you Republican or a Democrat? Hard to believe, but I didn't ask. So it would be. And I want their views on what they think. Also, very important, different parts of the country. Because you go to the Midwest, it's different than perhaps.
This was in January they were saying this?
The West Coast. Now, the West Coast, those numbers.
I mean,
are
they were wrong.
West Coast, very interesting. So we're going to be announcing that in a very short while, probably Tuesday. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Government officials
Hey,
in
Jeff.
Latin American and Caribbean nations, Bahamas, Cayman Islands, have been saying that U.S. authorities are blocking the shipment of PPE in certain cases, and I'm wondering if you could speak to that as
Well, what
is
they're
the
doing, we have a tremendous force out there, naval force, and we're blocking the shipment of drugs. So maybe what they're doing is stopping ships that they want to look. We're not blocking. What we're doing is we're making sure we don't want drugs in our country. And especially with the over 160 miles of wall, it's getting very hard to get through the border. They used to drive right through the border like they owned it. And in a certain way, they did. They could drive right. They had human traffic.
It's amazing how everything
All of a sudden,
ties
they had a
back to his
powerful
pet
wall.
issues.
and they're not driving through that wall. That wall is tough, and it's also loaded up with equipment, cameras and sensors and everything you can think of. On top of that, we have drones flying back and forth over it. So it's a very powerful barrier between Mexico and the United States. A lot of people, though, what they're doing now is they're trying to come in through the waterways, whether it's the Gulf or the ocean itself.
I know.
And what we're doing is we're being very tough, and we're being tough.
I think journalists are sort of playing into it too, you know?
And remember, the
it's just giving him the
mostly females.
Opportunity to spout off about
females. That. It's horrible, and what we're seeing is horrible. But you have we have a human trafficking problem worldwide, the likes of which, you think of it as an ancient thing. It's not ancient. It's bigger now than it's ever been before over the last 10 years because of the internet. The internet
oh my God. This is
to
just...
the extent that it is now, which is massive.
What does this fucking have to do with anything? It's
the
not...
internet made it so big. So we have a big naval force that's stopping. So maybe when you mention that, maybe their ships are getting caught. But we are stopping a lot of ships, and we're finding a lot of drugs.
I'm sure it has nothing to do with that.
Thank you, sir. On the additional money for small...
I meant you, but that's okay. Go ahead. We'll do this.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
On the additional money for small business, apparently Treasury Secretary Mnuchin speaking with the Democrats in Congress.
Yeah.
Are you allowing...
Are you talking about the new...
the new $250 billion.
$250.
Are you willing to give into the Democratic demands for additional money for hospitals, states, and cities in that interim round?
I'd rather have that be in phase 4. I don't deny it. I think it's fun, but I think it should be in phase 4, and I think we should have infrastructure, and I think we should have a payroll tax moratorium, because that's something that over a period of time the workers get, sort of semi-immediately. It's over that period of time. It starts immediately, but it's over a period of time. I mean, there are a lot of people, I'm one of them, that would have liked to have seen the payroll tax cut as a permanent cut. But we should do the double-edged, meaning business, employee, payroll tax cut. So we're talking about that. And I'm certainly okay with helping the states and helping the hospitals. I just think, because, look, the hospitals need help. You see what they've gone through.
But, Beep, it doesn't matter. It's just been inside. I put pens in my mouth.
They need big help.
There's no COVID on it.
Very strongly, but I like looking at it in phase 4.
I'm writing some notes
251
on this.
Is actually... the plan
What are you?
is working out well.
A narc?
They're getting started with the distribution. They've taken thousands and thousands of applications. The numbers aren't even believable, the number of applications. They're swamped, but Bank of America and Wells Fargo, and I guess Citibank is just now kicking in. And also what nobody's talking about, the commercial banks, the community banks. Everyone's talking commercial banks. The community banks are doing tremendous volumes. And they're probably doing them faster from what I understand. I hear the community banks, frankly, are the easiest ones in terms of getting the money out. So the money is getting out. The applications are far beyond what we ever anticipated.
Yeah, Beep, I like to take notes on pen and paper. It just helps me remember it a little more.
We want the businesses to hold on to their workers, because once they lose the workers, they're never opening again. It's not going to happen. Okay, in the back?
Gordon,
I don't always, though. I started recently.
Expand a little bit on your the form that Mexico would take, the reimbursements, like what form would that take? You essentially add it to the tab for the wall that you mentioned. I have a second question by that.
Well, there's no real cost, because we're agreeing to produce a little bit less. So number one, it's staying in the ground. You have it. You have it for another day.
Oil.
It's actually
Okay.
cheaper.
I gotta grab something to eat. Just a second. I'll show you, Beep.
Strategic reserves, our national strategic reserves, where has to be brought there, and that's an expensive process in itself. But oil is getting to a point where, I mean, there are some areas. Some people would say the water is more valuable than the oil. You never thought you were going to see that. You never thought, having covered, I know you cover it. You never thought you'd be seeing oil at $20 a barrel, but how about $10 a barrel? That you never thought you'd see. So we are looking at it very strongly. There is no real cost. I was helping I want to help Mexico out. We have a great relationship with Mexico, great relationship with the president. I really like him a lot. He's been terrific to us on the border because he stopped. You don't see the caravans coming up anymore. You don't see all the problems. When I took office, it was unbelievable what was going on. And they have been helping us a lot, and we've been helping them a lot. They make product for us. They sell it to us, and It's fine. It's a good relationship. And sometimes it's a great relationship. So he could not have done any more than that. And I think there was political reasons for that for him that other nations don't have. They don't have that. You know, the nations that we're talking about, the 22 other nations that we're talking about, they just don't have that problem. So it doesn't cost us anything, and yet it's very valuable. We will be reimbursed in the future, maybe in the near future, maybe in the more distant future, but we'll be reimbursed by Mexico in a certain way, and it'll be fine. But we get Mexico over the hump. Now, with all of that being said, that doesn't mean the deal's going to happen anyway, because they still have a lot of different states. But this was one of the stumbling blocks. Okay, go ahead.
If I may, China and some other countries have been particularly active, seen as maybe taking advantage of the U.S. during this process, during this period. China particularly active in the South China Sea. You've got a carrier down, obviously. What's your message to some of these adversaries and competitors?
Well, look, the way I view it is this. China has taken advantage of the United States for 30 years, okay? I mentioned the World Trade Organization. China has taken advantage of us through that and using rules that are unfair to the United States, and they should have never been allowed, this should have never been allowed to happen. When China joined and was allowed to join under those circumstances, the World Trade Organization, that was a very bad day for the United States because they had rules and regulations that were far different and far easier than our rules and regulations. Plus, they took advantage of them down to the last, and you know China and you study China, and you know what I mean. They took advantage of them like very few people would even think to take advantage of them. And again, they are considered, right, a developing nation. We are not considered a developing nation. They're given advantages. Okay. For many years, China has ripped off the United States. And then and right now, as you know, China's paying 25%.
Oh, God.
Billions and billions and
I gotta go.
dollars in tariffs from
I
China.
left the door open, I think.
And I know a lot of the people
And the
kept
cats
saying,
got out.
We're paying. Well, we're not paying. You know,
I think they're around here, but.
it's China. But China would devalue the
Ay.
currency, and they'd also pour out money. And they essentially were paying most of those tariffs, not us. And as you know, we've taken in tens of
I'll check on
millions.
their cars.
They targeted our farmers.
No, I know. Okay. I gotta go. I hope they're around here. Yeah, I gotta shake the food bag. Alright, I'll be back. Or I might not be back, but see ya guys. I'll let you know. Check my Twitter or whatever.